I'll answer this the same way that I did in a previous one. There is a reason why we have something called torts. If you want to know what torts are, it's a personal injury, it's negligence, it's when you get hit by a car and it's not your fault. It's when a doctor leaves something in you while you are being operated on. Those are what torts are. There's a reason why they were created in the first place. There was a gentleman in California who was for tort reform and was very happy when they got the cap, until he was in an accident a few years later and realized that that cap, now that he was a paraplegic, would not provide for the care that he needed. I think we need to begin with attorneys that take garbage cases, who simply are going after a settlement because they know some of these big places will settle rather than go through payments of litigation.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Ramsey?
I support reasonable tort reform. Most attorneys aren't going to accept garbage cases because they have to front end all the costs. They don't get paid until they receive a recovery. So unless you're one of these wealthy trial lawyers that can fly around the country in your private jet and are part of the 1% crowd, you can't. The average attorney here in Black Mountain cannot do that. They're not going to file a lawsuit unless it makes sense. The medical malpractice reform that our state passed this year is going to play a large part in helping North Carolina attract more doctors to address the primary care physician shortage that we're going to face. The workers' comp reform was passed on a bipartisan basis, where you got the attorneys, the businesses, folks from all political persuasions, and sit down and say, how can we solve this? How can we do it in a better way? And if I'm elected, that's what I will try to do. I'll try to reach out to everybody and try to find the best solution we can.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Have you ever conducted public business on personal electronic devices, and would you commit to not doing so?
I think that's an impossibility. You mean like a cell phone?
I would imagine that is what it's meant, but it's how you take it.
I'm a dairy farmer, and oftentimes I would speak with Commissioner Peterson while I was out in the cow lot. I used to joke with David Young. He'd call me up. I'd be scraping cow manure, and I said, you got to go on vacations to work and on cruises, and I'm out here scraping cow manure. I would call our county staff sometimes at 5 o'clock in the morning and leave voicemails about the stuff I was thinking about. So, when I had a chance on the farm, so there's no way that I could do this job without conducting public business on the phone.
I can attest that you've done news interviews while out on the dairy farm with the cows in the background. Ms. Wilson.
Ask that question again, please.
Have you ever conducted public business? You've not been a public official, but I assume it means in the future. Would you commit to not doing public business on personal electronic devices?
I am presuming that what they're talking about is using a personal computer or something like that. I would probably try to limit it as much as possible. But I think there are times, like Mr. Ramsey was talking about, when you wind up and the only phone you have is your personal phone and you are making calls on public business.
All right. We'll start with you, Ms. Wilson.
Sure.
The restructuring of mental health care in North Carolina has failed. How would you address and pay for changes to mental health care in the state?
First of all, I would make the Medicaid match so that we actually got the federal dollars that we needed. Also, when you make the Medicaid match, there's sort of a smorgasbord of choices, and one of them is mental health services that you can bring down as well. The other thing that I would do is I would talk to many of the local mental health individuals who are actually practicing in the field and have some ideas of how it can be reformed. Unfortunately, I think we have a lot of people who are talking about mental health reform and have never ever done anything in the field, and so they don't know how it's conducted, what's needed, or how to go about it. So I think you have to go to the experts and you have to talk with them and you have to come up with a joint plan. And I think as Mr. Ramsey has said, if we don't all work together to create a working system, and if we don't cross lines, then we're never going to get a mental health system that helps the abused and neglected, the mentally ill, etc.
All right,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Wilson, thank you. Mr. Ramsey?
First meeting, I was on the Board of Commissioners. The only official business outside of appointing a vice chair and maybe a few other things is I was appointed to the Blue Ridge Mental Health Board. And I quickly found out why I was chosen to serve on that board. It was one of the most rewarding experiences of the time I was on the Board of Commissioners, but also one of the more difficult boards or difficult tasks that I've ever encountered. And I quickly found out that you're going to pay for folks that have mental health, mental illness, substance abuse problems, one way or the other. So you're going to pay through the ER, the jails. It might not be county dollars, it might not be state dollars, but someone in our community is going to pay for that. So, you know, Buncombe County has been very fortunate to have some good leadership in this area and have adopted some things that if we could take their wisdom and insight and go statewide, we would be in much better shape than we are. The one thing I would question about what Ms. Wilson's talking about making the Medicaid match, if you're saying that...
Mr. Ramsey, you'll need to wrap it up. I'll give you 30 seconds to expand.
We have to have some cost controls in the Medicaid system. The state currently spends $4 billion a year in state dollars on Medicaid. That's about half as much as we spend on K-12 education. If we don't have some way to ameliorate that cost, or the federal government does not relieve that cost from us, it's going to consume the state budget, and we can't raise your taxes enough to pay for that. So there's a smart way to deal with it.
Ms. Wilson, would you like to respond at all on that?
Well, I would simply say that when you don't make the Medicaid match, you're leaving money on the table because you're not bringing in the federal funds that will help cover many of the expenses that we've been talking about.
All right, thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Ramsey. How would you work to create a collaborative versus contentious environment in Raleigh?
Well, for 8 years, I served with 4 Democrats. On most things, we were able to work together to find a solution that most of us could agree on, and probably for 6 of those 8 years, if we had a split vote, I was in the majority. Did we agree on everything? Some things come down to more partisan things, but most of the problems that we face in our community, if you lost your home to foreclosure, you lost your job, no one asks what your political party is. You know, the people standing in the unemployment line, this recession has affected us all. I was recognized by our State County Commissioners Association for working on a bipartisan way to solve problems. But, you know, when they called me and they said, hey, you know, here, we want to know what you know differently than what best practices you could give us, you know what I told them? It has nothing to do with me. I happen to serve with some people that, even though they might not agree with me, they would call me up and say, what do you think, Nathan? What do you think we ought to do? And so if you sit down and talk with people and say, I am willing to consider your opinion, that makes someone much more willing to work and solve a problem.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ramsey.
I've done domestic law for a long time, and I can tell you that if you aren't willing to work with the other side, you're never going to get anywhere. It is much better to mediate or to do something collaboratively than it is to constantly fight and butt heads. For one thing, you don't get anything done, and we've seen that on the national and on the state level. So I would definitely want to reach across the aisle and say, we need to work together. We've already talked about the workers' comp bill that was a bipartisan effort. There are many other things that I think we can do that are bipartisan.
All right, we've got 2 more questions.
Okay.
We'll start with you, Ms. Wilson. What is your position on women's reproductive rights, and please explain your reasoning.
Okay. I believe that women should have the right to make decisions about their own body. And I also think that women who wind up in a position where they are looking at what they're going to do because they suddenly wound up pregnant, or it's unexpected, or there is some health issue, I am not them. I cannot make decisions for them, nor should I be making decisions for them. I am not a doctor. I should not get in between a woman and her physician. I'm not in the position of the family. I'm not in the position of their religious advisor, and I think it's something that they need to decide on their own without the legislature stepping into the middle of that and making decisions that they know nothing about.
Mr. Ramsey.
I support women's health. We need women. Women are the backbone of our society. When I was on the Board of Commissioners, we worked very hard to reduce and eliminate racial health disparities in Buncombe County. I had the honor of serving on the Board of Health, and that was one of our strategic goals. We worked to improve cancer screenings for women so that low-income women could get the screenings they need to save it, and in some cases it saved their lives. I think a lot of times it's, reasonable people can disagree. And so you can be a woman and be pro-life, and you can be a woman and be pro-choice. And the Woman's Right to Know bill that was introduced in the legislature was introduced by a female legislator from Charlotte who was raped when she was a college student at UNC Chapel Hill. And so we just need to sometimes get beyond the law of the politics and realize that these are very complex issues. I'm going to stand on the side of protecting the innocent and the unborn, but...
Mr. Ramsey, please wrap up. Thank you. We'll start with you with the final question, though. America's in debt. As we know, $16 trillion deficit. North Carolina